felt pain of growth stalling? You launched, you got your first patient, awesome. You got 5, 10, 25, 20, sorry, not backwards, 25, 50. You get to 100, it's awesome. And then you slowly start creeping towards 200, 170, 172, 171, 180. You're just not making it to 200. And so Alexa and Alex are here to teach you 5 tactics for how to break through that 200 member ceiling.
All right, let's stand and give them a round of applause.
She picked the good side first. I got it.
I thought about that before I got on.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. One thing that I wanted to make sure we spent a few minutes on, or at least a second before we dive into it, was the cross-section between dad jokes and ducks. To have anyone's attention. So, what is a duck's favorite cracker? Nailed it. Thank you. I messed that joke up. Look at it. See, at least that helps me get out of my own skin a little bit and have some fun. But for real, what we're here for today is to talk a little about growth stalls. We were talking about this last week, and we said this is really for any business. Alexa and I are both business owners on top of what we do here at Hint, what I do here at Hint. And no matter where you're at in your business journey, there's going to be times when you hit a growth stall, and there's things that you can think about from a marketing perspective in order to help you get past that. And so really what we're here to talk about today are 5 tactics that we've tried and tested and been able to get through and coach people on as we go through it. All right, so let's dive right in. Alexa, first question for you. What would you say is the most common reasoning for why you might run or hit a growth wall?
I think in the beginning, people typically rely a lot on word of mouth, or maybe they've tried things and they're just very inconsistent in what they're trying to do. And so ultimately, I think even of myself when I started my business, ultimately, I didn't market really much at all. People saw my work, they reached out to me, it was all referral based, but you could only get so far. And so ultimately, when I went through my first scaling was when I figured out who am I speaking to, who is my target audience, and then that year that I figured that out, the business tripled, was once I could communicate and figure out where are my people and how can I reach out to them. So I think initially, the first thing that happens when you first start is not really having a strategy.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about, everyone here owns, in most cases, they own a portion of their business, they own their practice, they own whatever it may be. And oftentimes, you need to learn about letting go of that. We call this the key man syndrome. Raise your hand if you ever heard of key man syndrome. Keep your hand up if you have key man syndrome. Thank you very much. So what we want to talk about here is just identifying what that is, how we get through it a little bit, and we'll dive into that a little bit more as part of this conversation goes on. And then lastly, we're going to dive into how to build a business to scale for you. So first thing, though, is understanding what your natural marketing style is. What your natural marketing style is how you feel most comfortable putting yourself out there into the world. And so I'm going to hand it over to Alexa. She's going to talk a little bit more about natural marketing styles.
Yes, so I feel there are 4 marketing styles that people tend to fall into. You have someone that likes being more visible online. You have people that like in-person networking or like out there in their community. You have online visibility and in-person where you're kind of doing a bit of both. And then you have people that leverage referrals. And so ultimately, when you find out what you're most comfortable doing, it makes it so much easier to sell and connect with people because you're not trying to do somebody else's strategy. You're trying to do what is comfortable for you, and that makes it easier to leverage.
Which one of those 4 are you?
I'm both. I like both in person and online. So I've learned to leverage both the online community and in person so that I can grow my businesses.
Similar for me, I'm actually more about the digital scalability, and I love kind of watching the growth engine work, if you will. It's kind of like a challenge to figure it out. So it's fun, but the thing is, you realize you have to build your team around you with people that can do those things for you. And there's 2 of those people in the back for me, Haley and Danny, who helped put on this great event. Shout out. So diving in, kind of thinking a little bit more about that, you have to play to your strengths is ultimately what it comes down to. And if you don't have those strengths already in your practice, that's when you would start to look for outside help. And that's kind of where we get into the next step, which is getting uncomfortable.
Yes. Which part, though? Which one are we leaning towards?
Why don't we talk a little bit about how, as you step outside and potentially start to hire and things of that nature,
okay,
what that can feel like?
So kind of getting rid of your key man syndrome?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So in order to scale, I really believe figuring out how you can bring people to be part of your team, because obviously you can't do everything, and at a certain point you're going to burn yourself out. And you also need to decide how you can leverage different people's talents and gifts as well to come alongside of you. And so I've personally done that in the past in multiple ways, either hiring VAs or bringing someone in more permanently or full-time, and trusting them. So I think that's the other hard part with the key man syndrome. I'm very controlling, so I was like, no one can be like me and do it like me. But you realize that if you can humble yourself and trust the people that you bring in, sometimes they actually bring more value than if you just try to do it on your own. And so I think getting uncomfortable, one part of that is letting go, because that's really hard sometimes.
Would you refer to that as like the fear of outsourcing, or more of kind of a weakness, internal weakness around outsourcing?
I think it's more of a fear of losing that quality assurance in your business, and that if you bring someone on, they may not handle your clients or your patients the way you would hope they would. But the other thing is, you kind of have to have a moment and decide, like, do I want to stay where I am, or do I want to grow and be able to help more people? Because I do believe we all have our own talents and giftings that we bring to people, and sometimes we get in our own way by not allowing to bring people alongside of us so that you can help more people.
I would agree with that. Kind of going back to the 4 different personas that we talked about, another aspect of getting uncomfortable, if you will, is trying out new things. Well, you're not always going to be able to try each of these different tactics or methods, but the idea is if you put yourself in the position to do one of them once a month, maybe, at least you'll get the idea then of what it feels like to you. Is this something I can attain, I can continue to move forward with, and something I want to continue doing? Or is it going to be something that maybe I do want to actually outsource, or I want to bring someone in, I want to look at that for my next hire. Maybe you're looking to bring in an admin or a nurse practitioner or someone else in the business, and you're like, I want to make sure they can also do this thing for me, because that's something I recognize as a weakness and a place where we can improve as a business. Perfect. My personal story, we're going to talk a little bit about personal stories of growth and hiring and key man syndrome. So flashback 5-6 years ago now, I was growing my marketing agency, and I just recognized from day one I could not do all these things myself. I've always been more of the strategy behind what we did, and the key opportunity that I found was actually building a collective of friends around me, people who had the skill sets that I could trust that would get the job done and be able to show up for me when I needed them, and make sure that they recognized that they were valued and being paid for the value that they bring to kind of the projects that we did. And it ended up being a great partnership in the way that we continue to run the business today. So there's so many different ways you can think outside of the box. It doesn't always need to be a full-time new hire, because I know that can be extremely scary. Mm-hmm. What about yourself, personal?
When it comes to VAs, I started a lot with contract work because of the fear of, cash flow. And so I started the VAs first until I felt comfortable that I could bring in someone more full-time or part-time. And I also feel like, personally, the way I have built my team is I know what I'm really good at, which is sales and marketing and speaking to people and making connections. And so finding other people in their giftings and talents, like I said earlier, where I kind of set up what I call like my assembly line. And so what I've learned with the VAs I've hired, if I gave them too many tasks, sometimes they would fall short in areas and it became frustrating. And so I was like, okay, they're really good at this. I'm gonna have them only focus on these 2 or 3 tasks. And that created more of an assembly line where I had each person kind of dedicated to a specific task so that I could scale.
That's perfect. And when we think about kind of that leans more towards the delegating for scale as well, right? So when we think about delegating for scale, we're not just talking about hiring. We're not talking about working with agencies or VAs. We're also talking about the systems that you put in place, the tools that you use, the things like that. And Dr. V did a great job talking through some of these different AI products. But that's just something to make sure we think about as we're discussing what delegating for scale means. Some of these things, as you get comfortable with the agentic approach that we talked about there at the end, being able to take those tools and put them on auto drive for you and trust that they're going to get the job done. And always put yourself in there as a final check is what I definitely would recommend.
Yes.
Cool. So then the last thing we want to talk about here, or I guess second to last, is really around the diversifying your lead gen. So now we're getting more tactical. Right now, everything we talked about is, hey, how do we look at our business as a whole and set it up for success to be able to scale, get past this block. When we get into diversifying lead gen channels, what do we mean by that?
So kind of a multi-channel, I feel like going back to the foundation of like the word of mouth, but then doing speaking engagements, going to networking events. Maybe you're more of a shy person and like going out gives you anxiety. I mean, I have anxiety being up here, but I come up here because I'm here to educate. And so that's what I always tell myself is you have to kind of like think outside the box. If you want to grow, you're gonna have to do things that you don't always feel comfortable doing. But it's very hard to stay in one place. I mean, in your comfort zone, when has anyone ever grown, let's be honest, right? It's stepping outside to the things you're not comfortable doing so that you can get to the next level.
We're gonna do a quick little a question, if you will. Raise your hands. So first of all, is community presence. Who is out in their community, attending community events, doing different types of channel, things like that. So we got, okay, that those people are showing up in the community in that way. Who is doing outreach maybe through custom practice, packages, lunch and learns, showing up, going to actual employers? Okay, we got a few of those. Those are all tactics as well. And then what about in terms of like specific events that are for a very niche target audience? Who's going to like very super niche types of things? Okay. One that I think about from maybe a family doctor perspective is new moms groups, or in Santa Cruz we have the surfing moms groups, right? And so the things that you can uncover about what's happening in those small communities and how you can impact them makes a big difference, and I always encourage you to be a part of those types of like in-person real life events for sure.
The other thing I want to add that people sometimes don't think of is referrals, like how you can find people that serve the same ideal patient as you that people often don't think of, but you can leverage those connections. Because a great example I'll think of is this past client I have. She focuses on helping women with eating disorders, and she's a primary doctor. And so what she does is she works with mental health therapists that treat the eating disorder aspect. And so when you think of like who's serving a similar person, that's another way. It's not just maybe just networking or being online. It's also thinking who else is serving who I'm serving.
What are some other lead channels that you might want to diversify into, maybe you might not be doing today? If you've always relied on word of mouth, what other things are out there?
Oh goodness, everything. Now, social media, networking, being a vendor in a place that makes sense. I always tell people, don't waste your time and money on where your people aren't. Think the first strategy, going back to the strategy piece of lack of strategy, again, once you know who your niche is, who are you serving, and where are they, then you can leverage that and grow faster, because you're not just going to all these random places. Like it's like throwing a dart in the dark, right? So really, once you figure out that multi-channel approach, like you have some referrals, you go to some networking events, you apply to be a speaker even if it's super uncomfortable. You go and you get online and you write blogs, or you connect with people and you come out to be as an expert, which also helps leverage SEO. So as you begin to think, how can I get connected with people, then eventually all those things, it's like a little web you're creating in the atmosphere that are going to generate business for you in the future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, as we kind of move forward, the final step of designing for scale and talking a little bit more around the systems, specifically around that. So who has today standard operating procedures, SOPs for their business, their practice, things of that nature? How often are you sticking to those? Yeah? How often are you updating those? Have you tried to enhance those, make them better, maybe pumping them into a chat GPT engine, recording a video and saying, how can I do this better? Have you thought about those types of things? So SOPs, operating procedures, the way that you build your business, we can continue to improve upon that and making sure that you're designed to scale your business as you bring on new hires. Onboarding is one of the most time costly, I guess you say costly events, and also expensive things that we can do. And every time that if you bring someone on full time, if they end up churning or leaving for whatever reason, or if you let them go, that's a huge challenge for your business. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that you're able to get people up to speed quickly, mm-hmm. Effectively understand what their roles are, and then ensuring that they're the right person for the job early and often is something that we can't stress enough when you talk about designing for scale and kind of building out a growth tactic.
Honestly, I forgot what I was going to say.
It's okay.
But I was thinking about the scaling aspect and seeing like where you can grow and everything, but also figuring out like what is working and what isn't working. I think sometimes people have a hard time detaching from what's not working. But yes, setting up your kind of updating everything and your systems is really important, because it's always changing, especially as you grow.
Perfect. Cool. So one thing that we do at Hint, we host these regular marketing office hours. And part of the marketing office hours are an opportunity for us to touch on a topic similar like to what we just did, spend 15, 20 minutes talking about the topic specifically, and then we open it up for questions. And this is part of what Growth Bootcamp's about, is actually learning and growing together. So we're gonna open it up. We have a few mic runners out there, and we're gonna allow you guys to ask questions. Everything's on the table if it goes away from the topic we just talked about, but this all marketing related is what we'd like to do. Go right ahead.
Hi, thank you for coming and talking. My question is, over the 3.5 years since I opened my DPC, the way I practice medicine has changed a ton. And so now I do a lot more functional medicine, and it's at the point where you're like too many hands and too many pods and you want to dial it in. And so how do you change who your niche is? Because my wait list is still full of a lot of the people of like the old way I did things, but I see an open market and great opportunities for where the direction I continue to keep moving. And so how do you kind of restructure and rechange who your niche is? Because I don't want to go to that group. I want to keep moving towards the other group.
Yes. Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this is actually something I run into a lot, and the reality is it's okay that your niche changes, and I think when you start, you don't always know what that's going to look like, and as you know, 3 years now, you're seeing it's changed. So I would say changing your messaging on your website. When you present what you're selling, essentially, you need to speak to that target audience. So kind of going back to understanding who you're serving. And so if your website is still very like, let's say, we're DPC and like a general, okay. So if you're just like DPC heavy and you're not really talking about the functional medicine, or you don't have like packages, and I've worked with different physicians that have offered functional medicine, learning to package, figuring out what you're offering. Are you going to just get rid of DPC and go more functional medicine? Are you still going to offer primary care and put functional medicine? So kind of figuring out how are you going to now present yourself when you speak to people? What would you add to that?
So first thing I would say is in about an hour, Dr. Travis Simmons is going to be up here on stage talking about how to add new service line items or shifting and the steps that go into that. And then, so definitely don't want to miss that one because it's going to be really good. The one thing I would definitely touch on there is niching down in everything you do. So being very specific and intentional about who your audience is for that offering, right? And so as your practice grows, maybe you add multiple service line items, or you shift the way in which you practice, making sure that when people do land on that online, version of yourself, your website, that's very clear that they're there and that your website speaks to them. That is so important. Oftentimes, we look at a lot of direct primary care practices who are wanting to start to work with employers, right? And so I'll go to their website and I'll say to them, like, this website speaks really well to the retail, to your local community, to these things, but there's nothing on your website that tells me that you want to work with employers or how you're going to work to them. So if you're thinking about expanding that direction and working with employers, you have to add a page on your site that's for them. Think about if I'm coming to this place from the perspective of the lens of a CFO or a CEO, and I want to understand why I want to shift to this model of healthcare at the center of my health plan, you need to speak to those benefits and value propositions. It's not about the same aspects or the reasons why people might join your practice from a retail perspective. Next question. We got time for one or two more. Go ahead. You can speak loud, or I'll repeat it. Yeah.
For a not yet opened pediatric DPC practice, what do you guys think would be the best marketing or creating buzz, making it buzzworthy and everything? And also, we've been a bit delayed, so not creating a damper on that either, and just keeping up the excitement even though the practice has been delayed with opening.
Nice. Do you already have engagement in the community in terms of people that are like excited, can't wait for you to open, sort of thing? Cool. And is the delay, if you don't mind me asking, is the delay tied to like space issues or other aspects? Just can't. Now's not the time, right? Oh, gotcha. Yeah, fun. Yeah. The other fun stuff. Okay, not a problem. So I think partially you can continue to some sort of online form or way to engage with those people who have already showed interest that are maybe part of your pre-sign up or whatever it may be, and give them the benefit of what you're going to be able to offer them already without actually seeing their children, right? And so what I mean by that is if you're so tied into this industry, and someone that comes to mind is Dr. Phil Boucher, he does such a great job of, hey, what happened this week in my practice? What were the things people were coming in about? What are the questions that I get asked a lot? And he just turns that into 20-second, 30-second videos. He just talks, he's like, this week I'm seeing a lot of this. If you're a parent who's seeing this in your family, this is what you want to think about. If you can just provide that free consultation, free value to them, you're just going to continue to prove your education, your knowledge, and your value to them, so that when the time comes and you're ready to say, I'd love to see your child here now, they'll be ready to go.
I think another idea could even be like a lead magnet right now of how you can save those parents money, not having to run to the not emergency room because they might need to go, but like the urgent care, and maybe do some kind of freebie of how you can save people money, or maybe do some charts and like do like a download, and you can capture an email and do some kind of email marketing campaign in the meantime until you open. If you're able to do pre-enrollment, definitely would recommend that. If you have a kind of a date, obviously you don't want to keep pushing the date back, so if you're not ready to put a date on it, I definitely say leverage that in the meantime by collecting emails, because those will be your warmest audience instead of going completely cold. Another thing I would also say, like joining mom groups and like on Facebook, those are great to leverage as well, and try to start making those connections and just, finding ways to add value until you open.
Go for it.
So when you look at a lot of these practices, they focus heavily on new client acquisition. I think I heard a podcast that said like 90% of businesses are too focused on new client acquisition, and the customer experience and engagement starts to decline. When you've seen practices stall out, how have you seen the engagement side of it be impacted towards the stall?
I think the biggest thing that I find is they've launched their practice, they're starting to get momentum, and they've taken the foot off the gas from the acquisition perspective because they're so focused on the care that they're providing. And most of that care has led to word of mouth referrals, and that's where they've kind of gotten in that cycle of just enjoying the fruits of the word of mouth referrals. But eventually that will kind of taper off, right? And so that's when they need to realize, okay, now I need to figure out what are the different actual marketing tactics to create a funnel that drive people in the door that I at least can have those sit-down conversations and sell myself. Because I guarantee 95% of you, once they get into your office and sit down with you and you explain the value you provide and the story behind why you've chosen direct primary care as your model, they're just going to love you. And as like a patient, sorry, I keep doing that. As a patient of a DPC, like I can 100% say that.
What do you think the role is even in young DPC practices for bringing on like a part-time or full-time marketing person so that I can be providing patient care and I can have someone out in the community helping to have those like sit-down conversations?
Are you talking about a salesperson or someone doing your marketing?
Yeah, there's I don't know if they're in the room. Yeah, like Jamie at your practice in Tennessee, he does the sales for that practice. That's like his primary job. That's always been like a really fascinating concept to me that I don't see a lot of us doing. Like we're all trying to do that key man thing of like, I can do the doctoring and the admin and the onboarding and the hiring VAs and the sales. It's like that might be too many hats to balance on your head at one time. So like, do you see people doing this often? Do you see that succeeding?
I know a couple of people. I do think with DPC it's so personal, but I think it also goes back to how you present yourself. I think if you do have someone that understands it and can, there's different ways, but if they can go out and start going to these vendor booths and these business places or going to make connections in your community, and then maybe they take the sales calls to explain, but they're really well trained and like selling in a position of like what is important to that patient, because I think sometimes people just give general information of what DPC is, using DPC as an example, and not really focusing on what that person needs and why they came to you in the pain point. And so I do think it's helpful to leverage someone that understands sales and the psychology of sales of how to make that emotional connection. And that's actually something I've done for 20 years is I've always sold to the way the person, like why that person came. I don't just give them general information. I want to figure out like what is going on. So I think if you can train someone to create that, it would also help you grow and also help you close more people versus trying to always get new patients constantly. So if you can close more of what comes, that also helps too. So yeah, if you can find someone to leverage and maybe they don't understand or maybe they are someone, I don't know how you would find a salesperson per se.
Probably speak about that. What I would say, along those same lines is that it's all about intentionality of strategy. So like if your goal for your practice is to grow it to a certain number, you know that in order to do that, it's going to take someone to focus on that fully, and you bring them in with that in mind, then that's a great hire. That's a great way to go about it. I can think of, I look at Ryan over here in Strata, because at a certain point in their growth strategy, they had to do that, right? And that was part of what they want, the decision they want to make as a business. That person can be trained on growing retail lives through local groups, associations, whatever it may be, and also employer lives, which is, hey, how do you get them to go out and start to make these relationships with small businesses and things of that nature? So,
That's really good.
yeah. I know we have one more question. Grab us afterwards. For that, we have to finish up. But what we're going to do real quick, the last thing, I do have one slide to show. So if you want to speak to this real quick.
Oh yes, this is a free quiz I have, and at the end you get kind of like a result, and then it kind of tells you some of the pain points, some ideas. It gives you a little bit of some strategy ideas to trigger of what you can be doing a little bit differently. First, figuring out your natural style, and then what are some of the pain points that you might come into with that style, and how could you get a little uncomfortable to continue growing.
Yeah, if you think about what's the first step of everything we talked about today, figure out where you fit, what's your natural style, and then from there you can start to identify the ways that you can fill those gaps. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.